Hi, my name is Terry, and you're watching Terry Tells the Story. Today we're talking about the Ghost Army, the artists who fooled Hitler. Imagine you're a German scout in 1944. You look through your binoculars across the French countryside and you see it. A massive battalion of Allied tanks, hundreds of them. You hear the clanking of treads, the roar of engines, and the chatter of thousands of soldiers. You report back to High Command. The Americans are here! But there was a secret that you didn't know. If you had walked up to one of those tanks and pushed it with your finger, it would have tipped over. Because the tank wasn't made of steel, it was made of rubber and air. This is the story of the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, also known as the Ghost Army. A hand-picked group of artists, sound designers, and actors who went to war armed with nothing but paintbrushes, giant speakers, and the most dangerous weapon, a lie. In 1944, the U.S. Army did something unprecedented. They didn't just look for the strongest men, they looked for the most creative. They went to art schools in New York and Philadelphia. They recruited future fashion icons like Bill Blass and artists like Ellsworth Kelly. The Army realized that if they could master the art of visual deception, they could save thousands of lives. These men were trained at Camp Forest, Tennessee, but their training was unconventional. While other soldiers practiced shooting, these men practiced how to make 90-pound inflatable tanks look like 40-ton Sherman tanks from a distance. They studied shadows. They learned how to paint fake tire tracks on the ground, so German planes flying overhead would think that a massive convoy had just passed through. They were creating a traveling roadshow of war. To pull this off, the Ghost Army used a triple threat of deception. First, visual, the inflatables. They had air compressors that could blow up a tank in 20 minutes. But they didn't stop at tanks. They had inflatable aircrafts, trucks, and even fake laundry hanging on lines to make empty fields look like bustling camps. Second was sonic. This was groundbreaking. Engineers at Bell Labs recorded the sounds of real tanks and armored vehicles onto massive, state-of-the-art glass records. They mounted giant 500-pound speakers onto half-tracks. At night, they would blast these sounds toward the German lines. From 2 miles away, it sounded like a massive armored division was moving in for the kill. Third was radio. This was the spoof radio. Actors would mimic the specific typing styles of real Allied radio operators. They would broadcast fake orders for the Germans to intercept them, leading them to believe the Allies were planning attacks in places they weren't even located. But the most dangerous part of the job happened in the French cafes. The Ghost Army soldiers would go into town wearing patches of other famous divisions, like the 1st Infantry. They would sit in bars where they knew German spies were listening and drunkenly talk about where their unit was heading next. They were literally acting for their lives. If the Germans realized these men were frauds, the entire Ghost Army would have been wiped out in minutes. They were often operating just a few hundred yards from the front lines with no real weapons to defend themselves. Their only shield was the illusion they created. The Ghost Army's finest hour came during Operation Viersen in 1945. They were tasked with pretending to be 2 full divisions, 30,000 men crossing the Rhine River. They set up over 600 inflatable vehicles. They blasted the sounds of construction, so Germans thought that they were building bridges. The Germans moved their entire defense to meet this ghost force. Meanwhile, the Ninth Army crossed the river miles away with almost zero resistance. The Germans were so thoroughly convinced by the Ghost Army that when they received panicked reports of the real assault, they assumed that that attack was the diversion and refused to respond to it. It is estimated that this trick saved the lives of 15 to 30,000 American soldiers. But here's the wildest part. When the war ended, the Pentagon classified the entire project. These men were told they could never tell their wives, their children, or their friends that they had done it. For 50 years, the world thought they were just ordinary soldiers or artists. It wasn't until the mid-90s that the records were declassified and the Ghost Army finally stepped out of the shadows. So, the Spanish I'm going to be teaching you today is el arma más poderosa. El arma más poderosa. And what that means is the most powerful weapon. If you like this video or you learned something new, drop a like down below. If you have a specific topic that you'd like to see me cover, drop me a comment. And if you'd like to support this work that I do, there'll be a link to the Cashapp in the description box below. We'll see you next time.